Welcome to the Criminologist podcast. Our goal here is to educate and enlighten our listeners, focusing on the latest and greatest evidence-based interventions to help individuals desist from a life of crime and delinquency. And not only those factors which drive folks into crime, we also look at the reasons why people exit a life of crime. Also, we attempt to paint an accurate picture of that journey from the perspective of the justice-involved individual. Too often, our perceptions of those involved in the system are tainted by media-driven caricatures created to sell newspapers or movie tickets. This adds little to a healthy dialogue as to how to best address criminality. This podcast will avoid stereotypes and biases. We will endeavor to accomplish the first two goals in a way that keep you, the listener, interested and even entertained. And now, the host of The Criminologist, Joseph Arvidsson.
Hello, and welcome to episode 50 of the Criminologist podcast. Happy to have you all with us today. Holy cow, can you believe we have made it all the way to 50 episodes? Thank you to all of you who have been on this journey of discovery with me from the start. And great to have all of you on board who've hopped on since we left the station. Today, I'm getting back into the office, so to speak, to share another client session with you, or should I say service user, bringing back our old friend Henry Hill for a visit. When we last left Henry, he was in my office and we were going over some cognitive behavioral interventions. Specifically, we went over some problem-solving techniques and also a couple of social skills. And those, of course, are things we could do under the risk-need-responsivity framework. In this episode, as you are about to hear, we start with some role clarification. Thank you, Dr. Chris Trotter, as always, for that insight. And then we segue over to the world of desistance once again. I have dabbled with this technique a bit in the past, but going to highlight once again the importance of identity in the desistance process. More to the point, those themes of self-efficacy and agency. That is, how our service users can really help themselves in their desistance journey by employing a bit of self-actualization. I'm going to show you a tool entitled 3 Steps to a Crime-Free Self. This is really all about shifting the service user's narrative from a condemnation script to a redemption script. I am sure many of you have heard those terms before in the desistance literature and or on this podcast. But to recap, many service users struggle in that they're still laboring under their condemnation script. They see themselves again as offender or gangster, criminal, addict, convict, and the trick with identity transformation is to flip that script around and have them viewing themselves, seeing themselves as a father, mother, a good neighbor, a valued employee, a citizen. Again, really flipping that script from a condemnation script, sort of a, this is my fate or this is my lot in life, to a redemption script. And again, we've talked about this in the past, really the flipping of that script to this is the real me. As Shad Maruna talks about in his book, Making Good, this notion of burning out versus firing up. And again, I would encourage you to go out and read that book, or again, we've talked about redemption scripts in the past. And so that's what we're going to explore here in this episode. It really starts, I feel, with the individuals themselves imagining what their future crime-free self can look like. This can be done in a variety of ways. Maybe having your clients write a poem or a short story or even a song about how they see their positive future playing out. And in this episode, I'm going to model for you all what this might look like with the assistance, again, of client Henry Hill. So I'm going to bring you that interview now, and we will see you all on the other side. And here he is, Henry Hill, right on time, in fact. How are you, Henry?
I'm great. Thanks for asking.
Well, great is better than good. What moved the needle for you?
Oh, I don't know. Things just seem to be going smooth lately. No drama in my life, which is always a plus.
It certainly is. When things are going well, don't question it, correct?
Yeah, I mean, I'm doing good in treatment, worked out an agreement with my sister as far as transportation. Things all seem to be falling into place at the moment.
That is awesome to hear, Henry. Awesome to hear. Those social skills we worked on last time went smoothly then?
Yep. I had a good talk with my sister, which went a long way for me, actually. So thanks for the tips.
Just doing my job, Henry. Glad they worked out for you, and glad that you seem to be in a good place right now. Why don't we begin today by reviewing something I know we've talked about in the past, but also something I never want to assume, and that is that you understand the nature of our roles in this relationship. Let me ask, what do you feel my role is here?
Well, I know that if I screw up, you'll have to lock my ass up.
Yes, that is one of my responsibilities as an officer of the court, to report infractions to your sentencing judge. What else?
I also know that if I want anything, you can at least try to hook me up.
Sure. I can broker resources to you, help you myself with any interventions that I can do on my own, things of that nature. I work for the government. I'm here to help. Recall that in the past, we've also talked about what I refer to as negotiables and non-negotiables. Does that ring a bell for you, Henry?
Oh, sure it does. Stuff like if I'm late or even miss a meeting, we can work on that. But if I kill somebody, you have to report that.
That is a bit extreme as an example of a non-negotiable, killing somebody. But yes, there are certain things, in fact, most things, that are negotiable as to how they affect your supervision. But there are a few things, such as killing somebody, or more broadly speaking, perhaps new violations of the law, that I have to at least report back to the court. Yes, Henry, very good. And what do you recall as to confidentiality, specifically limits of confidentiality?
Was that the what happens in Vegas stays in Vegas one?
Yes. Nice reframe. Yeah, essentially, I want this space with us to be a safe space, a space where you feel you can share things with me. And yes, for the most part, what you tell me in this office stays in Vegas, as you put it, with some exceptions, of course. If you ever tell me something which leads me to believe that you'll harm yourself or do harm to others, then I have my obligation as a mandated reporter to take actions. But as you say, for the most part, what happens in Vegas stays in Vegas. And again, I really like to revisit those things from time to time, in that we know one of the biggest reasons we have failures on supervision is simply due to the fact that clients, or service users as we say, simply don't understand the relationship between them and their probation officer.
Actually, you are the first PO I've ever had who takes the time to explain that, and I really appreciate that. So, what else is on the agenda for today?
So glad you asked. I had one thing on my mind, but as we always like to say, you are driving the bus. What is on your mind? What is it you'd like to talk with me about today?
Well, I really have nothing big to go over. As I said, things are going well with treatment. I've got a handle on transportation thanks to my sister, and, well, actually thanks to you and those techniques we went through last time.
Sure. Those were the problem-solving skills and the social skills, and I'm thrilled you were able to put them into practice. And even more thrilled we got the results we were looking for.
Although, speaking of what you can do for me, I was wondering, about maybe we could look at how often I have to come downtown to drip UAs. I mean, they are taking those as part of my treatment. And don't you get those results anyway? So I was hoping maybe that as long as I'm in treatment taking drug tests, we could maybe take another look at how often I have to do those for you as well.
Oh, great point, Henry. Shame on me for not connecting the dots on that sooner. Yeah, I can suspend you from the urinalysis program you're on for as long as you're doing those as part of your outpatient treatment. Good reminder. Thanks. What else?
Nothing else really. Like I said, pretty uneventful right now for me, which is good. What was it, the things that you wanted to go over today?
I was thinking that since we seem to be on a good course as to your goals around your using, we could try another tool from the toolbox.
Love the toolbox. Let's go for it.
Excellent. Henry, let me ask, have I ever talked to you about the idea of desisting from crime, or what folks call desistance?
Boy, I've learned a lot of things from you, but I'm not sure I've heard that term before. Tell me more.
I would be delighted to. In a nutshell, we in the corrections field, probation, parole, etc., embrace a model which looks at the reasons that folks get into crime and delinquency. What would you guess some of those reasons might be, Henry?
Reasons why folks get into crime? I guess I've never really thought of it. Can you give me a hint?
Well, feel free to use yourself as an example, Henry, if that helps. What were some of the reasons you first got into trouble as a juvenile, do you think?
Well, for me, that's easy. My mom and dad were more or less out of the picture. And I had a bunch of knucklehead friends, and with those knucklehead friends, we liked to party. And once we became known to the cops, the old revolving door kicked in, as they say.
Great job, Henry. So through my highly focused risk assessment lens, this is what I just heard. The risk factors of dysfunctional family, negative peers, and substance misuse were all present during your adolescence and contributed to your entry into crime.
Sounds very official, like something I would hear on forensic files. I'm intrigued. Please continue.
Let's look at each of those factors you just rattled off. Mom and dad, not in the picture. No parents around equals lots of free time for a young Henry to run around raising hell, correct?
Check.
And with that lack of parenting came an increase in the time you spent with your friends and associates, many of whom I suspect were into risk-taking and thrill-seeking and adventure craving, just like young Henry, correct?
Double check.
And along the way, you and your friends started drinking beers and smoking weed, and that led to all sorts of other experimenting, correct?
Rounding second base, heading for third.
And eventually, all three of those variables culminated into your entry into the criminal justice system, along with, I suspect, some antisocial thinking and antisocial personality pattern to land you in that chair today.
Well, you kind of nailed it. So that is what you called what again? That started with a D?
Desistance? No, not yet. That is, as I said, the model we use which looks at the reasons folks get into crime. Once we know those pathways into crime, we can start addressing and treating them. For you, Henry, that means taking a look at your substance abuse along with your friends and maybe even some family dynamics. Desistance, though, looks at not why folks enter crime, but rather how they exit a life of crime, why they stop or desist from criminal activity. And although some of those factors, such as substance abuse, are the same, interestingly, some are not. My question to you, Henry, is this. How interested are you into looking at some of those things on the pathway out of crime?
As I said, I am intrigued.
Excellent. One of the things we look at when trying to promote a service user's desistance is to really examine their identity. More to the point, we know that the more you can imagine your future crime-free self, the more you can kind of turn into a self-fulfilling prophecy.
Well, I've at least heard that term before, self-fulfilling prophecy, so you're getting warmer. Aha!
I have a handy-dandy tool here, Henry, and as you can see, it's entitled 3 Steps to a Crime-Free Self.
Fancy, laminated and everything.
Cockroaches and my laminated tools will be the only thing to survive the zombie apocalypse, Henry.
Well, let's hope it does not come to that.
Let's hope not. Okay, so as you can see, after each step, there's some space for you to fill in the blanks, sort of like short little essay questions. So step 1, imagine your future crime-free self. For example, in the future, I see myself as sober and having a stable job that I love, that kind of thing. Make sense?
Yeah, but that was not really a short essay.
I know. That was a small illustration. The key to this is providing as much detail as possible. The more detail, the better. Just sort of get into a little creative writing zone and imagine the person you'll be at some point in the future when you're off probation, no longer struggling with addiction or going to treatment. What does that look like in your mind's eye? Does that make sense?
Yeah, I think I understand. You want me to look into my crystal ball and describe the future I see for myself.
Precisely, Henry, precisely. Okay, step 2 then is to list some steps you can take to make it happen. So for example, maybe things like graduate from treatment or find a different job that you really want to turn into a career or even find a positive support network. How does that land on you? Yeah,
I can see that, although I may need some time to ponder that one over. Is that okay?
Of course. In fact, my thought was to assign this to you as a homework assignment. Let you take a few blank copies home and scribble your thoughts down as they come to you between now and our next office visit. So no pressure to come up with your final answers now.
Okay, cool. What's the next step?
Step 3 is to list some strengths that can help you stay on track.
Strengths. What do you mean by strengths?
Sure. By strengths, we mean things like I am a highly motivated person, or my family is behind me 100%, or I have a really good work ethic. Things of that nature. Take the time to think about the things you've accomplished in your life, Henry, and dig deeper and look at what are some of your personal characteristics behind those accomplishments. I think if you reflect on that for a bit, you'll surprise yourself. Okay, well, good thing you were assigning this as homework because I'm not so sure I would do so well on this last pop quiz. You're going to do fine with this, Henry. And as I said, the more detail, the better. This is also about getting you to start looking at how you see yourself. That is, not as a probation client or an addict or a couch surfing seasonal employee, but rather a sober citizen, a good neighbor, a career man. And it all starts with you thinking about that person you want to become, Henry. Okay, cool. So no pressure then. Hey, I always tell my clients, you are the expert of you. You are in control of your thoughts, feelings, identity, and all those factors which shape who you are. As I said earlier, you're driving the bus here, friend. Why do I feel like Keanu Reeves in that movie Speed? As long as you don't Thelma and Louise us over the next cliff. Imagine you are at a correctional and or criminology and or implementation science conference and you score a seat at the head table reserved for all the keynote speakers. How awesome would it be to listen in on the conversations of folks like Shad Bernuna, Fergus McNeil, Sarah Lewis, Jane Mulcahy, Glenn Tapia, Guy Bergone, Cam Stevens, James Bonta, and so many more. Well, no need to dream about that anymore. I brought all of those thought leaders together for you on my own YouTube channel, The Criminologist. In addition to my original content, I've created individual playlists featuring videos of all these folks and more. Subscribe to the Criminologist channel now and reserve your seat at the head table. To recap what you just heard in that short vignette as to evidence-based practices or evidence-informed practices, started out with a little bit of role clarification, and again, that's based on the work of Chris Trotter out of Australia, who discovered that when dealing with non-voluntary populations, sometimes the biggest reasons behind failures is that the service user just was unaware or there were uncertainties around the nature of the relationship. And so you heard me recap a little bit of those with Henry. I've clearly done this with Henry before because, as you heard, I was evoking from him what his recollections were from our previous sessions where I outlined the various aspects of role clarification, whether it's the client's expectations on supervision, what they believe my role is in the process or the practitioner's role, limits of confidentiality, that type of thing. And again, Chris Trotter, great resource if you want to go down that rabbit hole and find out all about the value of role clarification in that relationship. We recapped what I did in the previous session, which were some of those traditional cognitive behavioral interventions, things like problem solving and modeling of social skills, which, as you heard in this interview, paid off for Henry because the issue was him not being able to get to outpatient treatment over some transportation issues, but we resolved those by re-examining the relationship with his sister. And then, of course, you heard 3 steps to a future crime-free self. So dabbling a bit from the desistance literature and really showing how, as we've talked about in the past, the risk-need responsivity framework and the emerging desistance models are not in competition. Rather, they are 2 points on a continuum. And so we here at the Paragon Group feel that both of those models can afford the practitioner a more holistic approach to supervising their clientele. We will be back next week with a fresh episode. In the meantime, you may contact the show or reach out to us through our website, theparagongroup.llc.com, for training or presentations as to evidence-based practices or implementation science, or of course, the topic of desistance from crime. If you have questions or comments as to this podcast, feel free to contact the show via our email at thecriminologistpodcast@gmail.com. That's thecriminologistpodcast@gmail.com. We can provide, again, training or services around content of the show. And of course, we can do that virtually now over Zoom or whatever platform you prefer. Remember to follow us through our Facebook page and our Instagram pages at The Criminologist Podcast. New fun images are being added all the time to those feeds. You don't want to miss out. The Criminologist Media Group is on Twitter. You can follow us at Crim Media Group, CRM Media Group. Our Twitter handle is at Crim Media Group. Go ahead and give us a follow. You can also connect with me, Joseph Arvidsson, on LinkedIn, and follow both the Criminologist Podcast and the Paragon Group on our LinkedIn pages. Lastly, if you've not already done so, check out and subscribe to our YouTube channel, The Criminologist, for additional content as to the themes of this podcast. Merchandise is available. Reach out if interested. And if you believe in what we're doing on the show, if you're part of the movement, please spread the word. Tell a friend or a coworker or a colleague about us. Ask them to subscribe to the podcast. And of course, do so yourself if you've not already done so. And always remember, folks, there's no them. There's only us.
Okay, then listen. Let's not get caught. What are you talking about? Let's keep going. What do you mean? Go.
The Criminologist podcast is a production of the Paragon Group, LLC. For speaking engagements, interviews, program design, training opportunities, or to contact the host, please visit us at theparagongroup.llc.com. Click on the Contact Us tab in the upper right-hand side of the page. Be sure to give us a 5-star review, and thanks for listening.
The thoughts, statements, and opinions of the host and cast members do not necessarily reflect the views of their employers and are those of the host and cast themselves. Any discussion regarding client statements, behaviors, actions, or crimes are purely fictional and are used only for the purposes of example. Any examples that could be deemed to be related to an actual individual or individuals are incidental.